Oh man. I feel like I need to tell that story from the beginning. Hang on a sec. So, all right. Oh man. All right. Chat. I got a story time for you. Okay, so I worked at a hotel and I was on the night shift. And I was there and one day these guys called down and they're like, "Hey, there's two of them and they're in rooms right next to each other." And one of them's like, "Hey, my idiot friend Bobby locked himself out of his room." And he's like, "Shut up, Ted." And he's like, "Can you let Bob into his room?" And I'm like, "Okay." And I was like, "I'm gonna ask you a couple questions just to confirm it's really you, and then I can open your room." And he's like, "Okay." So I asked him a few questions like from his ID that we had on file, and he passes. And I'm like, "Okay." So I go upstairs and I've got a master key card. You know, it's like one of those electronic key cards. And I go to his door and I unlock it and I go to open it and I hit something physical. And basically, there's like a swing latch on the door, and he had slammed the door with such force that the physical latch closed. And I was like, oh my god. And I now know a way using a card to pop those open. At that time, I didn't know that. So I was like, I can't get this open. And he's like, okay. I was like, I could give you another room. And he's like, the problem is my bags are in there. And I was like, crap. Okay. So I call our maintenance guy, and it's like midnight. And our maintenance guy is like, what? And he was Czechoslovakian. He had a very thick accent. And dude, that guy was a gem. He'd be like, "This is my lovely wife." Dude, he was a holler. But anyway, that's off topic. So I called him up and he's like, "What are you calling me?" And I was just like, "Hey, I can't get this door open. The swing latch is shut. What should I do?" And he's like, "Just get those are like $2. Get my tools, just rip it off the hinge. I'll replace it tomorrow. I am not coming in at midnight." And he just hangs up the phone. And I'm like, he literally just told me to just rip this thing off its hinges? Okay. So I get his tools, and like again, I'm trying to tear off a swing latch on the other side of a door from me. So I get all his tools and I bring them up there. And Bob and Ted get beers out of Ted's room and come out into the hallway with chairs and sit, and they just kick back like they're watching fireworks, and they're watching me destroy this door and just drinking. It was such a surreal experience. And I'm still trying to be professional because, you know, they're the guests of the hotel. And I'm using like a monkey wrench and I'm just mangling this lock, just trying to like tear it off of the door. And they're watching and like finally I managed to tear it down. And they're like, "You know, we like it. You put so much effort into this." And they tipped me $20. And that wasn't a job where I got tips. So that was like the only tip I'd gotten that year. So I'm like, oh my gosh, hot dog, you know? So they tipped me $20. And one of them's like, "Hey, you ever heard of medieval times?" And if for any of you, there's versions of this all over the United States, but medieval times is kind of like a restaurant, but it's around like a jousting arena. So there's like a show where people do like this whole, you know, knights and Camelot and magic and Merlin and stuff like that. And like depending on where you sit, you'll either be like cheering on the green knight, the yellow knight, and they're doing actual jousting and stuff. And they're like, "Have you heard of medieval times?" I'm like, "Yeah, one just opened, you know, nearby at the Discover Mills Mall." And they're like, "Okay, we own that." I was like, "You own that?" And they're like, yeah. So, you know, we're rich. And, you know, they like clink their beers together. And I'm like, "Okay." And they're like, "We like how much effort you put into destroying this door. We want to offer you a job." And I'm like, "Okay." And, you know, I'm like in my early 20s at this point. I'm just completely flabbergasted by this whole experience. Like, I destroy a door at midnight and I'm getting a job offer. And they're like, "Hey, go. Here's a number. This is the manager of the location. Go talk to him. See about getting a job." And I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, "All right. You know, I wasn't trying to get a different job, but you know, if it's something I'm willing to do and it pays better, I'll take it." So the next day, I call the medieval times place, and I'm like, "Hey, is so and so there, the manager?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Hey, Bob and Ted told me to call you about a job offer," and they're like, I guess I could find something for you to do." Like, okay. So that's what he said, "You know, come in for the interview." And so I come in, and they're completely slammed. You know, they're like running around. There's like a restaurant being run. There's a gift shop. They're taking care of horses. It's like all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's when he says, like, "Fill out the application." I fill it out. And like for words per minute, I put 75 to 150 because I couldn't remember how fast I typed. And he's like, "What is this? Did you just drink a Red Bull and double its speed?" And I'm like, "No, I just don't remember. I used to type 150. It might be slower now." And he's like, "Fine." And I remember he was just like, "Look, he's like, I'm happy to give you a job. I don't know where to put you." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Have you ever done bartending?" And I don't even drink alcohol. I didn't then, and I don't now. And I was like, "No, but I'm happy to learn." And he's like, "Okay. Have you ever handled birds of prey?" like, what, like falcons? Like hawks? And he's like, "Owls specifically." And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "But I'm willing to learn." And he's just like, he's like, "Okay." He's like, "So you're wanting to get more than X dollars an hour to get a job here?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I want to raise if I'm going to swap jobs." And he's like, "All right, the only thing I could put you at," he's like, you could be a waiter in the restaurant area, or you could work security." And I'm just like, in my head, I'm just thinking, man, I ain't stopping nobody. There's dudes running around here in full plate armor. I don't even know if I can lift that armor. Are you kidding? No, I ain't stopping anybody here. I don't think I should be on your security force. And I was like, all right, I'll think about it. And I went home and I thought about, did I want to become a waiter there? And I was just like, nah, I called it back and I just politely declined. I thanked him for the time. But the whole thing was an experience. Like, do you have experience with raptors? No. Have you served alcohol? I'm like, what? Like, it was just all over the place. The whole experience was surreal. But it was fun. And I got to destroy a door and I made 20 bucks. That's the story of how I almost worked at a jousting arena. How many dragons have you tamed in your life? They didn't ask me about dragons. Going from how fast you type to have you done bartending to how you handle birds of prey is insane. Yeah, that was all in the same job. They apparently had a lot of different tasks there to do.